Jaren Jackson Jr., Marcus Smart, Yiannis, Draymond Green, and Kawhi Leonard. What do these 5 players have in common? Each one has taken home the NBA's Defensive Player of the Year award within the past decade, with Kawhi standing out as the only one among them to win it twice during that span. But there's something else they all share, something that defines the modern defensive archetype. They are what we call versatile on-ball defenders, players capable of guarding all 5 positions on the court. Whether it be switching onto a lightning-quick guard or battling a big in the post, they can hold their own. That kind of adaptability is gradually becoming the gold standard. So, if these 5 players account for 6 of the last 10 Defensive Player of the Year trophies, then who claimed the remaining 4? Well, unlike the diversity in names, those 4 awards were all claimed by one man, Rudy Gobert. Now, Gobert isn't someone you'd label as a versatile on-ball defender. He doesn't switch onto guards or wings with ease, but his rim protection and interior dominance have earned him the honor not once, but 4 times. We'll dive deeper into what makes him special later in the video. But back to our original 5. Their success tells us something important about the direction of the award. Contrary to popular belief, Gobert is the exception, not the norm. The Defensive Player of the Year award has increasingly leaned toward rewarding versatility, especially the ability to guard multiple positions and hold your own in ISO. We're living in a new era, an era where defensive adaptability is being prioritized and praised more and more. And while Gobert's 4 trophies in the last decade may have skewed our perception, make no mistake, voters are placing a premium on defensive versatility. To put that into perspective, going all the way back to 1997, excluding the last 10 seasons, only one player won this award who could truly be classified as a switch-everything, all-position defender, and that was Metta World Peace. That shift in voter mindset speaks volumes. That said, there might be one traditional big man in this year's conversation who could echo Gobert's mold and challenge that trend. But for the most part, the frontrunners this season are versatile defenders, players who can switch, slide, and shut down. So in this video, we'll break down the leading candidates and evaluate them based on 3 key defensive criteria: their effectiveness in one-on-one isolation situations, their versatility in guarding different types of players such as guards, wings, and bigs, and last but not least, their ability to shut down elite offensive players on an island. These criteria are designed to strip away the noise. We're isolating the defender's true impact, independent of scheme, system, or supporting cast. And that final point, the ability to nullify the league's best scorers one-on-one, that's going to be the ultimate deciding factor when I make my pick for this season's Defensive Player of the Year later in this video. And since I've already teased it, let's dive right into the 9 players that most sportsbooks currently believe are in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. They are Draymond Green, Evan Mobley, Dyson Daniels, Jaren Jackson Jr., Lou Dort, Amen Thompson, Ivica Zubac, Bam Adebayo, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But before we break things down, let me clarify something. In order to keep things fair, without leaning too heavily in favor of either big men or perimeter defenders, we'll be evaluating both their ISO defensive metrics on the perimeter and in the post. This way, every aspect of individual defense is accounted for. So to kick things off, here's a ranking of all 9 players based on the points per possession they allow in ISO defense. At the top of the chart, we have the player allowing the fewest points per possession, while at the bottom, we have the player allowing the most. And just based off these rankings alone, Draymond emerges as the most effective overall ISO defender, followed closely by Bam, with Dyson right behind them. Now looking deeper into the numbers, what really separates Draymond and Bam is their elite ability to force tough, contested shots and convert those into misses. Draymond has a defensive effective field goal percentage of 27.4%, while Bam isn't far behind at 31.3%. These are not just the best marks among the 9 candidates, they're some of the best percentages in the entire league. To put that into perspective, the gap between Draymond and Lou Dort, who holds the 3rd best defensive effective field goal percentage, is nearly identical to the gap between Dort and Mobley, who ranks last in that category. That speaks volumes about just how suffocating Draymond and Bam have been this season in one-on-one situations. On the other hand, Dyson has taken a very different route to becoming an elite ISO defender. His success isn't primarily about forcing misses, it's about generating turnovers. and he's been doing that at an absurd level. This season, Dyson has racked up a staggering 229 steals. Let me put that into context for you. Bruce Brown, who ranks 259th in the league in total steals, is closer to second place Shai Gilgeous-Alexander than Shai is to Dyson at number 1. That's how insane Dyson's steal numbers are. Historically speaking, that total also places him 20th all-time for the most steals in a single season. Now, I'd love to go deeper into Dyson's full defensive campaign, but I already made an entire video covering that. If you're interested, you can check it out by clicking the link in the top right corner of the screen. But back to the broader point. Each of these players brings something unique to the table when it comes to ISO defense. Whether it's Draymond and Bam's shot disruption, or Dyson's relentless ability to generate turnovers, everyone on this list has earned their spot for different reasons. And when we put it all together, Draymond tops the leaderboard in ISO defense, just narrowly edging out Bam. Now, shifting gears, let's look at how these players perform in post defense. Here's the updated ranking based on points per possession allowed in the post. And leading the way, unsurprisingly, is Ivica Zubac. And honestly, that shouldn't be a shock. Much like Draymond and Bam in ISO defense, Zubac holds a commanding lead here. In fact, he is quietly having an underrated season on the defensive end, particularly in ISO. While most of the attention gravitates toward his rim protection, his on-ball defense deserves just as much recognition. In many ways, Zubac's Defensive Player of the Year candidacy mirrors Gobert's case from last season. Like Zubac now, Gobert wasn't known for his on-ball versatility, yet he turned in one of the most overlooked ISO defensive campaigns in recent memory. Last year, Gobert held opponents to just 0.73 points per possession in isolation and 0.75 on post-ups while racking up 162 total blocks. Those are elite numbers. In contrast, Zubac this season has allowed 0.86 points per possession in ISO and 0.82 on post-ups with a total of 90 blocks. Those are solid numbers as well. But when held up next to Gobert's production, the gap becomes more apparent. And it's here where Zubac's case may begin to lose traction with voters. Gobert often gets dismissed in award conversations because of his perceived playoff shortcomings, especially when switched onto the perimeter. But during the regular seasons in which he won DPOY 4 times now, he was consistently exceptional in ISO defense. Even in his worst award-winning season, Gobert's ISO and rim protection metrics surpassed what Zubac is delivering this year. And perhaps most importantly, Gobert's defensive performances last regular season against the league's top-tier offensive talent were nothing short of elite. That level of dominance is what set him apart, and what Zubac needed to match or come close to if he had hopes of standing out in a crowded field of candidates who are not only elite defenders but are also viewed as more versatile and complete. And keep in mind, this year's field is deeper and more competitive than it was last season. None of this is meant to take away from the impressive defensive season Zubac has had. It's been a standout campaign. But when you consider the voting trends of the past decade, and the fact that Gobert is the only non-versatile on-ball defender to have won the award during that span, it's hard to envision Zubac walking away with the trophy this year. But still, we will continue to dive into Zubac's numbers and see how he stacks up against the other top-tier defenders in the race. Now, circling back to our ISO defense leaderboards, while they gave us a solid breakdown of each player's strengths in one-on-one situations and highlighted who's been most effective defensively in ISO matchups, there's one key piece missing from those rankings. What the numbers don't show is the level of difficulty each defender faced in their matchups. This is something I touched on earlier when discussing why Gobert took home Defensive Player of the Year last season. His success wasn't just about stopping players, but who he was stopping, the elite scorers in the league. These metrics don't tell us how frequently a player was tasked with guarding an all-star or all-NBA caliber scorer in ISO, nor how well they held up in those high-stakes moments. And that context is crucial. So, to bridge that gap, we've introduced a new layer to our analysis, our matchup difficulty points system. This system evaluates 2 key factors: how often a player was matched up against high-level offensive talent, as well as how effective they were at limiting those players. Using this, we created 2 new leaderboards, one for matchup difficulty and the other for effectiveness against star-level opponents. On the difficulty front, Dyson leads the pack with the most minutes spent guarding the league's top offensive threats. And Zubac, despite our analysis earlier, surprisingly tops the effectiveness leaderboard, proving to be highly efficient when facing elite scorers. Now, when we combine both difficulty and effectiveness to form our overall rankings, Amin emerges at the top, with Shai landing at the bottom. But this shouldn't come as a shock. After all, the Thunder usually assign Dort or Jalen Williams to handle the opposing team's best scorer, while Shai typically defends the second, third, or even fourth option. One final name worth highlighting here is Dyson. Despite leading all 9 candidates in matchup difficulty, his relative struggles in shutting down those elite players compared to the rest ultimately caused him to slide to 5th in our overall rankings. Before I reveal who I believe should take home this season's Defensive Player of the Year award, which, if you've been following along closely, might already be a little obvious, let's take a step back. I want to briefly compare our 9 candidates this season to past winners of the award. Earlier, we looked at Zubac and drew some comparisons with Gobert, since their defensive roles are quite similar. Now, it's time to run that same comparison for the other 8 contenders. Among the last 5 Defensive Player of the Year winners, excluding Gobert, Jaren actually had the weakest season in ISO defense, giving up 0.84 points per possession. On the flip side, Yiannis had the best, allowing a jaw-dropping 0.42 points per possession. And when we shift our focus to post-defense, the pattern holds. Jaren again had the roughest numbers, giving up 1.04 points per possession, while Marcus Smart led the pack, allowing just 0.69. That's a pretty significant difference. Looking even deeper into Jaren's DPOY campaign, his effectiveness against top-tier matchups wasn't particularly standout. So that begs the question, how did he end up winning Defensive Player of the Year in 2023? Well, for those who recall, Jaren was elite as a help defender and rim protector that season. He racked up 189 blocks, second most in the league, and far more than what Gobert had last season when he won Defensive Player of the Year. But what really separated Jaren that year was his dominance at the rim. He posted the best high-volume rim defensive field goal percentage in the entire league, by a mile. It wasn't even close. So, while his ISO defense was just decent, his incredible shot blocking and help defense carried him to the award. What this shows us is that while ISO defense is arguably the most important factor for voters, it's not everything. If a player's ISO defense isn't elite, they need to bring something exceptional to the table, like Dyson's current historic season in terms of steals. So now we've arrived at the moment of truth. My pick for the 2024-2025 Defensive Player of the Year. After diving into the numbers, looking at each candidate's season, comparing them with past winners, and highlighting some outliers, my choice for the award is going to be Amin Thompson. When you piece everything together, matchup difficulty, effectiveness, and ISO defense, no one this season stood out more than Amin. He's been the most complete, well-rounded defender of the year. That said, it wasn't an easy choice. Dort and Bam came extremely close for me. Their versatility and ability to lock down some of the league's top offensive talents can't be overlooked. And Dyson's absurd numbers in the steals department definitely gave me pause as well. But what tipped the scale for Amin was how consistent and multidimensional his defense has been. He ranked in the top 20 for both steals and blocks. But what truly set him apart was his elite help defense. Among all players who defended at least 500 field goal attempts, no one in the entire league held opponents to a lower shooting percentage than Amin. He limited scorers to just 40.7% from the field, a full 2% better than Victor Wembanyama, who was the frontrunner for Defensive Player of the Year prior to his injury. And it doesn't stop there. As a rim deterrent, Amin held opponents to just 56.8% shooting at the rim, comparable to Zubac and even more efficient than his fellow Defensive Player of the Year candidates in Mobley, Draymond, and Bam. Still, at the end of the day, this video isn't about my pick. It's about helping you interpret the data and come to your own conclusion. So let me know, who's your Defensive Player of the Year? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how you evaluated the candidates. And as always, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate your support and can't wait to break down more film with you in the next one.